In a crystal shop, our protagonist, Sean, was admiring all the new stones that had just arrived at the store, his eyes nearly popping out of his head from how mesmerized he was by their shapes and the way they sparkled in the sunlight. The shop owner liked his enthusiasm, so he showed him around and introduced him to the different types of crystals he had. But just then, the university bell rang. The shop owner told him to run quickly so he wouldn't miss his lectures and that he could come back later to continue looking around at his own pace. So, he ran off, and on his way, he told us that he couldn't even remember when he first started loving crystals this much. Every time he looked at one, he felt like there was a mysterious world hidden inside, different from the one he lived in. If he stared long enough, he felt like he'd be pulled into that world and live an adventure beyond imagination. If only something like that could happen. At the end of the day, he went home to his mother, and they had dinner together. He told her about what he had seen at the crystal shop, mentioning a particular crystal that, just by looking at it, made one feel as if it contained hidden worlds and secrets. His mother told him that the crystal he saw must have been quartz. He was surprised she knew and told her that it was only natural since she was an archaeologist. He then asked her when she would be going back to work, and she said she still needed another year or two. She then asked him if he was excited for the weekend. He told her he absolutely was and that he couldn't wait for his father's birthday since, for once, he was finally making time to celebrate with them at home. He added that no matter what happened or how busy his father was, he would go himself to bring him home. The week passed, and on the day off, he sent his father a message, reminding him about his birthday and telling him they would start the celebration at 7 p.m. so he wouldn't be late like every other time. But when the clock struck 7 o'clock, his father still hadn't arrived and wasn't answering their calls. His mother told him they could start the celebration and eat while waiting for his father to arrive, but he told her that he had promised her he would bring his father back no matter what. So, he got up, left the house, and ran to his father's workplace to bring him home. At that time, his father, Professor Hasinga, was extremely busy with his research and didn't have time to answer his son's calls. But strangely, at that very moment, we saw a boy named Emilio. From his clothing and surroundings, he seemed to be from a different era or world. He was holding a dagger and sneaking into a palace. When he reached the king's chamber, he raised his dagger to strike, only to be caught by the king, who had woken up just in time. Incidentally, the king was also his uncle. The king told him he was a coward for choosing to kill him in his sleep and that if he had any shred of courage left, he would have come and fought him to reclaim his father's throne. Emilio told him not to mention his father's name and then pulled out a long, powerful weapon from his chest. The king also drew his weapon, and they fought. But from the very first strike, the king overpowered Emilio and ordered his guards to throw him in prison. While in his cell, Emilio recalled his painful memories from childhood, how he once believed that the current king, Daizilon, loved him and had raised him after his father, the former king, passed away. But one day, by sheer coincidence, he overheard the palace staff talking and learned the truth. Daizilon was actually his father's enemy and had been the one who killed him. The shocking revelation shattered Emilio, but he kept it buried inside, training tirelessly as he grew, preparing himself to one day take revenge and reclaim his rightful throne. Meanwhile, Sean had reached his father's company and entered his office, only to find it empty. But something caught his eye, a blue crystal unlike any he had ever seen. His curiosity got the better of him, and he picked it up. The moment he did, a bright blue light shone from it, opening a portal to an entirely different place. The crystal then entered his chest, and he vanished. The real surprise came when the portal opened in Emilio's world, and Sean emerged from it, looking around in confusion, not understanding anything. Emilio bombarded him with questions, not leaving him alone for a second, repeatedly asking who he was, how he got there, and whether he was from the surface. But Sean kept telling him that he had no idea and didn't understand anything. Emilio, growing frustrated, told him to hide before the guards found him if he didn't want this to be the end of him. But the guards suddenly appeared, and Sean, terrified, felt like it was all over. Luckily, his fear triggered something inside him, and a weapon materialized from his chest. He instinctively grabbed it and defeated the guards with a single strike, so powerful that it caused the entire place to collapse. The upside was that the prison holding Emilio was also destroyed, so he grabbed Sean, and they escaped. At that moment, Professor Hasinga was in his office, shocked to find that the crystal was missing. His wife called, asking about their son Sean, who was supposed to be with him at the office but still hadn't returned. His father stood there in shock, hoping that what he was thinking hadn't actually happened. Meanwhile, Emilio and Sean continued running from the palace. But then, one of the king's guards appeared. Sean was terrified at the sight of him since he looked more like a beast than a human. But there was no time to be afraid. The two of them had to fight. However, the guard was too strong and managed to knock them into the water. Emilio quickly grabbed Sean and led him into a hidden underground passage. Sean asked him the name of the place they were in, and Emilio told him it was called Andorra. They climbed out of the passage, where a girl immediately ran over to check on Prince Emilio. She anxiously asked him who the person with him was. Emilio told her his name was Sean, and that he was from the surface. At that moment, Sean also started bombarding Emilio with questions, asking how he could be both a prince and a prisoner, what kind of world this was, and insisting that he had to answer all his questions because, without him, he wouldn't have escaped from prison. Emilio, completely fed up, told him that he would have escaped on his own just fine and that if anything, it was because of him that he ended up breaking out of the palace. The two of them started arguing, until the girl stopped them, telling them to cut it out for now. She introduced herself to Sean, saying her name was Alicia and that the small pet with her was called Flareon. After that, Sean tried to find a way to leave, but he couldn't, as even his phone had no signal. At that time, the king was searching for Emilio. He spoke to the guard who had knocked Emilio into the river and his group, ordering them to track down the boy who had helped him escape. Meanwhile, Emilio and Alicia continued on their way, with Sean constantly asking where they were headed, but Emilio completely ignored him, refusing to talk. Alicia decided to help and told him they were going to Pascal. He asked who Pascal was, and she explained that Pascal was the one who had raised and trained Emilio. He was also a great scholar with a small research center in his home. Suddenly, a massive beast with a crystal horn appeared before them. Emilio immediately drew his weapon, blocking the creature's attack. Alicia ordered Flareon to go and assist Emilio quickly. In an instant, the small, adorable creature transformed into a massive and ferocious beast, taking down the monster. Sean was relieved, but just then, another creature appeared. The moment Sean saw it, he panicked, and his weapon emerged. He grabbed it, and with a single strike, he defeated the beast, shattering its crystal horn. Emilio was stunned by the weapon's power, but the moment Pascal appeared before them, he forgot all about it and started talking to him instead. The moment Pascal saw Sean, he immediately recognized that he was from the surface just by his mannerisms. However, he was extremely puzzled by the weapon that emerged from his chest. When they arrived at Pascal's home and sat down, Sean noticed a vast collection of crystals and began examining them, only for Emilio to keep yelling at him not to touch anything. They started arguing again, and Alicia told Pascal that they had been at each other's throats like this since the moment they met. Pascal reassured her not to worry, saying the two of them would become great friends eventually. Later, they all sat down to eat, but Sean found the food unappetizing. The people here ate strange things, but since he was starving, he had no choice but to eat with them. Afterward, he asked Pascal if there was any way he could return to his world. Pascal asked him how he had arrived in the first place. Sean explained that he had been heading to his father's office when he found a crystal there, and the moment he touched it, it transported him to their world. Pascal told him he understood everything now. He cleared the table and placed a map in front of him, pointing to the location of Andorra. Sean was shocked when he saw it. It was underground. Andorra was vastly different from the surface because its light came from a massive moonlight crystal that absorbed light from the northern pole and reflected it back onto them. Sean quickly grew bored of the explanation and asked again how he could return to the surface, as they called it. Pascal told him that a long time ago, before he was even born, their world had been able to connect with the surface through the city of Babylon. Andorra had a counterpart city, Babel, that allowed travel between the two worlds. But some time ago, Babel was destroyed, and the current king had been trying to repair it. However, he was facing some issues, and unless they were resolved, there would be no way to reconnect with the surface or send him back. Sean told them it wasn't a problem. He would go to Babel himself and stay there until it was fixed. Alicia told him that Babel was extremely far away from them now, but he insisted that he missed his father and mother too much and would do whatever it took to return to his world. At that moment, Pascal warned them that the royal guards had surrounded the house from all sides. They all tensed up, unsure of what to do. Pascal then remembered the airship he had built and left unused, saving it for a time of need. He quickly got them all on board and took off, flying away from the house. As they soared through the air, Pascal told Sean that he had helped build Babel, and he was also the reason why the king was struggling to repair it. There was a small secret he had never told anyone, and it would slow them down until they could manage to fix it. But Sean was thrilled at that moment because there was still hope that it could be repaired. He immediately asked Pascal to take them to Babel right away. However, Pascal told him they were heading to the hideout he had prepared instead. The argument between them dragged on for a while until Emilio, fed up, turned to Sean and told him to shut up completely. In the end, Pascal had the final say and led them to his hideout. But the moment they arrived, they found it was just a massive hole. Alicia looked at him in disbelief and asked how this place was supposed to protect them from the king's guards. Pascal told her to wait and not be so quick to judge. And indeed, the moment they climbed down the hole, they discovered a vast underground space. They kept walking, but every time Sean walked ahead, Emilio sped up to get in front of him. So, Sean also sped up, and Alicia was baffled by how childishly they were acting. After that, everyone settled in and took a short rest. But Pascal pulled Emilio aside and asked him how he had met Sean. Emilio told him that when he was in prison, a mysterious portal suddenly appeared, and Sean emerged from it. But through that portal, he caught a glimpse of a strange world he had never seen before. He asked Pascal if what he had seen was the world above the surface. Pascal confirmed that it was. Meanwhile, Sean and Alicia were talking, with Sean saying that their world was incredibly strange. He had never read about it before, but he used to enjoy reading books about the Earth's interior. He added that if his world ever discovered Andorra, it would be a groundbreaking discovery for them. Meanwhile, Emilio and Pascal continued their conversation. Pascal told Emilio that the surface and Andorra must never establish contact with each other. The ancient texts had warned them multiple times about interacting with the surface dwellers. They had to be cautious. However, not too long ago, some people from the surface started coming underground, believing they would find a vast land full of riches they could exploit. In a very short time, Babel was built, making contact with the surface incredibly easy. But then, out of nowhere, it was destroyed. The king had been trying to rebuild it and was in constant communication with the research facility to track its progress. That was why Pascal left the facility. He refused to continue working on the city because he disagreed with the king's vision. He had even altered parts of its design so they wouldn't be able to repair it. But now, he was planning to send Sean back and then destroy it completely to sever all connections for good. He told Emilio that he was willing to help him with whatever he wanted to do. Emilio, confused, asked what exactly he meant by helping him. Pascal replied that he would assist him with the very reason he had snuck into the king's palace that night and ended up in prison. Then, he walked away. At that moment, Emilio recalled his childhood, when he first learned the truth about the king. From then on, instead of playing with toys, he trained with a sword every day. He remembered Pascal coming to him and telling him that he was responsible for his training. Pascal had taken him to the laboratory and they had spent a lot of time together, with Pascal teaching him many things. But one day, Pascal had gone to the king and warned him that restoring Babel would bring disaster upon Andorra. But the king refused to listen, dismissed him, and banished him from the palace. Because of this, Pascal was separated from Emilio, and the king caused Emilio to lose most of the people he loved. Afterward, Emilio returned to the hideout, and Pascal told them they needed to gather some supplies since they would be staying there for a while. He said he would go to the nearby village to get them and that if anything happened, they should meet him there. He disguised himself so no one from the palace would recognize him. Alicia also said she would go fetch some water and return shortly. At that moment, Emilio turned to Sean and asked if he wanted to return to his world. Sean told him that, of course, he did. Emilio then told him that he would help him return if he helped him eliminate the king. Sean immediately refused, saying he could never help with something like that. Emilio then told him that if the king wasn't killed, he wouldn't be able to return to his world at all. Sean believed him and realized he had no other choice, so he told him he was in. Emilio told him to get ready because once everyone was asleep that night, they would sneak out before anyone woke up. And so, when night fell and everyone had gone to sleep, Emilio took Sean, and the two of them escaped together. They climbed to the top of a hill, where Emilio stood, observing the camps below. Sean stood beside him, not understanding anything but simply going along with it. But suddenly, they were ambushed from behind by a group of people who threatened them, demanding to know exactly what they were doing there. Emilio told them that he was the Prince of Andorra and had come to speak with their leader. One of them spoke up and asked why exactly he wanted to speak with the leader. Emilio told him that he needed his help to defeat the king. So, they took him to meet their leader, and Emilio told him that while he was in the palace, he had heard about the Ignatus group. He knew that they were rebels who despised the king and wanted to overthrow him. That was why he had come to them now, to get their help in eliminating the king. Their leader was surprised and asked why he would do such a thing to the king, who had practically raised him like a father. Emilio became furious and told him that the king meant nothing to him and was not his father. The leader then asked what would happen after the king was dead, what exactly Emilio planned to do. Emilio thought for a moment and then said that he wanted nothing else. All he wanted was to see the king dead. The leader grabbed him and called him a fool and a failure for having no goal beyond revenge. The members of the Ignatus group began urging their leader to get rid of Emilio and Sean since they had seen their faces and knew their location, making them a threat. But the leader stopped them and mocked Emilio, saying that King Daizilon must surely regret raising someone like him. Enraged, Emilio drew his weapon and attacked the leader. But despite using a basic and much weaker weapon, the leader easily knocked Emilio to the ground. Sean got angry and pulled out his own weapon, but the moment the leader saw it, he was amazed by its power. However, with a swift move, he tied Sean's leg and hung him from a tree. Then, he told Emilio that he would take care of the king himself and didn't need a weak prince like him to lead them. At that moment, as Sean dangled from the tree, he shouted to the leader, telling him to give Emilio a chance, he would prove that he was a worthy king who deserved to rule after Daizilon, and they should listen to him. The leader was impressed with Sean and decided to release him, letting him drop back to the ground. He then told Emilio that he would give him a chance. If he wanted to join them, he could, but for as long as he stayed with them, he would have to prove that he was worthy of being king. And if he managed to do that, they would become his right hand. Meanwhile, Pascal arrived at the village, entered a shop while in disguise, and once he saw the shopkeeper, he removed his disguise. They made sure the place was secure before sitting down to talk. The shopkeeper asked if he was hiding from the king's soldiers. Pascal confirmed that he was because they had figured out that he was the one tampering with Babel's system, preventing them from repairing the city. He then told his friend that he wanted to understand why the king was so determined to restore Babel and reunite the surface with Andorra, despite all the warnings that it would bring disaster. Meanwhile, Emilio and Sean were taken to the rebel camp, where everyone worked together. Their first assigned task was doing laundry with the rest of the group. While there, Sean met someone named Elogia. While washing clothes, Elogia slipped and fell into the water. The group quickly rescued him, and as soon as he got up, they asked him what he had seen. Sean was confused and asked what they meant. They explained that every time Elogia came close to death, he could see the future. Elogia then told them that he had seen Sean in a strange world unlike anything he had ever seen before, one that resembled the surface. Sean was thrilled because this was proof that he would return home. But what worried Elogia was that in the vision, Sean had been standing there, completely shocked. However, he chose not to tell him that part to avoid scaring him. Meanwhile, when Pascal returned to the hideout, he found Alicia sitting there. She told him that Emilio and Sean had disappeared. Pascal became worried and told her that they had probably gone to Babel on their own. So, he and Alicia boarded his airship and took off to search for them before they could reach the city. Meanwhile, after finishing the laundry and hanging it up, Sean and Emilio started arguing again. Emilio kept giving Sean orders, but Sean hated being bossed around. When they started exchanging insults, Sean told Emilio that it wasn't surprising coming from someone who wanted to kill his own father. At that moment, Emilio lost his temper and punched him. Their leader and the rest of the group stood watching from above, commenting that it wouldn't be long before they both got tired and stopped fighting. After finishing their fight, both Emilio and Sean were exhausted and collapsed on the ground. The leader then ordered the group to wake them up. They all gathered for a meeting, and the leader told them that they needed to win over the northern people because they all despised the king for exiling them and making them outcasts in Andorra. But even that wouldn't be enough, so they discussed who else they could recruit to their side. However, they realized that everyone hated them. No one liked them or wanted to join their group, and on top of that, they had no idea how large the king's army was, making it impossible to plan on outnumbering them. But since Emilio had once been a prince in the palace, he told them that the king's army numbered around 80,000 soldiers. The group was stunned by the number, saying there was no way they could gather a force larger than that. But the leader had a different idea. He told them that they needed to recruit the Zoo clan. At that moment, everyone, including Emilio, was shocked. Emilio told them that the Zoo clan was the last group they should be thinking about because they were allied with the king, and half of them were in the royal army. He then told Sean that the lion that had attacked them earlier had belonged to the Zoo clan. Sean commented that they were incredibly strong and that it would be difficult to recruit them. But the leader told them that not all of the Zoo clan supported the king. For a long time, their clan had been oppressed, and if they could negotiate with them, they might convince them that once the king was overthrown, their suffering would finally end. He then told Louis, one of their members, to prepare in case he needed her to negotiate with them. Meanwhile, Sean's only goal was to reach the city of Babel and return to his world. So, he told the leader that if he wanted to predict the king's next move, he was certain that he would head to Babel. This was information the leader didn't know, so he thanked Sean for it. After the meeting ended, Emilio thought to himself that if the leader successfully allied with the powerful Zoo clan, he would no longer need Sean and could get rid of him. At the same time, Sean was entirely focused on steering the rebellion toward Babel so that when he got there, he could find a way back to his world and rid himself of Emilio's orders and control. Later, Louis approached them and told them to get inside the wagon so they could receive a vaccine against mosquito bites. In Andorra, if a mosquito absorbed someone's blood, they would die instantly. Sean quickly entered with Emilio, and while inside, he asked Louis about the Zoo clan, wanting to learn more about them. Louis told him that, coincidentally, she was half Zuzian. She explained that long ago, the people of Andreas were the ones who had oppressed the Zoo clan. This had caused major conflicts between the people and the clan, which was why they were persecuted. Sean then asked if the leader knew much about the Zoo clan. She told him a little about the leader's past, explaining that when he was young, he had befriended someone from the Zoo clan. They had been very close and had grown up together. But one day, while they were walking, they saw a Zuzian being tortured. His friend tried to intervene, but the people beat him severely, attacking the leader as well. He had been powerless to help, and his friend died afterward. That was all she knew about the leader's connection to the Zoo clan. After that, She left, and the leader asked her about Emilio and Sean. She told him they were still fighting as usual. The leader then said that as long as they kept fighting, over time, they would start to get along and eventually become friends. The next day, Emilio went to ask Elogia about his future, but he knew that Elogia could only predict the future when he was close to death. So, he set up a trap to put him in danger, hoping to force a prediction. But Elogia saw through Sean's trick and punished him instead. He told him that if he could catch the blue Andorra bird, he would return to the surface instantly. Of course, there was no such thing as the blue Andorra bird. He had only said that to punish him. But Sean believed it and immediately ran off, searching for the bird. Suddenly, a royal guard from the Zoo clan, along with a group of soldiers, ambushed Sean. When Emilio learned that Sean was in danger, he ran as fast as he could to help him. The leader and the rest of the group also rushed to his aid, and together, they fought against the king's Zuzian soldiers. But suddenly, Sean's weapon emitted a bright light and grew larger, making him even stronger. He charged forward alongside Emilio and severely wounded the guard. The guard, now frightened, retreated, and with the group's help, they forced the rest of the king's soldiers to withdraw as well. Emilio and Sean kept running, both of them terrified, until they were far away from the battle. Once they reached a safe spot, they both burst into laughter. Emilio couldn't believe what had happened with Sean's weapon, and for a moment, they were both happy. But suddenly, they came face to face with Pascal and Alicia. Alicia was furious, yelling at them, demanding to know how they could just leave her behind and run off. Pascal started explaining how he had managed to reach them so quickly, but no one was paying attention. Alicia kept scolding them until the leader's group arrived. Sean became worried that the group might harm Pascal and Alicia since they had discovered their hideout, but the group didn't seem to care. They told Sean and Emilio that they were leaving and that they should catch up later. Sean quickly followed them to avoid getting lost, and Alicia ran after him so he wouldn't be alone. Pascal and Emilio followed as well, but Emilio looked visibly upset. After that, the leader told them where they would be setting up camp. Alicia and Sean went with the group, while Pascal sat with Emilio to the side and asked him why he wanted to kill the king who had raised him. Emilio told him that the king was the one who had killed his real father. Pascal then asked him how he knew for sure that this was true. Emilio admitted that he had no proof, but that was what he had heard. Pascal was surprised and pointed out that he was doing all this based on something that might not even be true. Emilio insisted that the king must have done it because he was greedy for power. Pascal told him that even if the king had been power-hungry and even if he was truly responsible for his father's death, they didn't know the full reason behind his actions. But Emilio refused to believe anything good could ever be said about the king. Finally, Pascal, fed up, told Emilio that he needed to go speak with the king himself and learn the truth about what had really happened. Meanwhile, the rest of the group followed the leader to a restaurant in the village where they were temporarily staying. The group told the leader that there were no royal guards in the village, making it a safe place for them for now. One of them asked the leader what they were going to do about Sean and Emilio. The leader said that Sean and Emilio had proven to be useful. During the last battle, he had noticed their strength, and they might come in handy later. As for their other companions, they weren't that important. At that moment, they heard shouting outside, only to find that it was Sean arguing with the restaurant owner, who was refusing to let him in. The leader intervened and convinced the owner to let him enter. Sean then told them that he was fed up with staying around because Pascal and Emilio were constantly fighting. Alicia was taking out all her anger on him, and all he wanted was to get to Babel and return to his world. The leader pulled out a map and pointed to Babel's location, showing him how far away it was. He told Sean that it would take them a long time to get there because they would have to cross many dangerous territories filled with deadly people. Sean felt a little discouraged. He then walked over to Emilio and told him that now that he was done being scolded by Pascal, he should come with him because the group had probably finished setting up the tents, and they could get some rest. Emilio agreed and went with him, but when they arrived, they were surprised to see Pascal, who had previously called the group a bunch of savages, now standing with them and looking completely comfortable. He was enjoying himself because they were the only ones who truly appreciated his scientific inventions. Meanwhile, Louis had approached Alicia and introduced herself. Since Alicia was the only girl in the group, she was excited to finally have another female member with her. Emilio was still upset with Pascal and was about to say something to start another argument when Felix, who had grown tired of all their fighting, grabbed both Sean and Emilio, pulled them away from the group, and told them to come with him to scout the area together. Pascal then used a device he had brought with him. The readings on the device indicated that the royal laboratory was getting close to solving Babel's problem, which was not a reassuring sign. After some time, Emilio and the group arrived at the city of Andreas, which was separated from Babel by only a sea that they just had to cross. But before doing so, the leader told them that they would first stop by an island where the Zoo clan lived to negotiate with them. After that, they would head to Babel. At that moment, Sean was extremely excited, not just because he was finally going to Babel, but also because the atmosphere around him was beautiful and completely different. They all booked rooms at a hotel, and Sean and Emilio were assigned the same room. When Pascal and Alicia saw how excited Sean was, they told him that he should explore the city and go shopping because he would really enjoy it. Besides, they all needed to buy warm clothes since the island's weather was freezing and too harsh to survive in their current outfits. Alicia told Emilio to go with Sean so they could both shop in the city. But Emilio refused, saying that there was no way he would go with Sean. Sean immediately responded that he also had no intention of going with him, and the two of them started arguing again. Alicia, fed up, got frustrated and told them to stop because she was going shopping, and both of them would be coming with her. Emilio finally agreed, and the three of them went shopping in the city. Sean was thrilled. While exploring, they ran into the leader and Elogia. Seeing how excited Sean was, they laughed at him and suggested a few things he could do in the city to have even more fun. Sean took their advice, and their outing was led by Alicia, who covered all the expenses since neither of them had any money. As they walked through the city, a young boy suddenly stole Emilio's dagger. Emilio immediately ran after him, with Sean and Alicia following close behind. When they finally caught up, Emilio grabbed the boy and told him that stealing was wrong and that he shouldn't do it. But Alicia noticed that the boy had younger siblings watching from a distance. She took the boy and his siblings and gave them food, while Sean played with them for a while. Alicia then told Emilio that Sean was truly kind-hearted. After they finished playing with the children, they noticed that night was falling. They gathered their things and started heading back to the hotel. But on the way, Emilio suddenly spotted an arrow flying toward them. He quickly pushed Sean and Alicia aside just before they could get hit. Suddenly, a young girl appeared before them, a metal collar around her neck. The only thing she kept saying was, "Kill the prince." Sean, Emilio, and Alicia prepared to fight her, but she kept firing countless explosive arrows. It turned out that her weapon was just like the ones Sean and Emilio had. But both of them were completely shocked to find that they couldn't even get close to her. She was incredibly strong. She fired an arrow near Sean, and the explosion knocked him to the ground, leaving him unable to get up. But just in time, Elogia and the leader arrived. The leader attacked the girl and restrained her, forcing her to stop. Elogia explained that this type of child was the most dangerous kind of assassin. They started as abandoned street kids, but when someone noticed that they possessed powerful weapons, they were captured and sold to the wealthy. But before being sold, all of their emotions were erased, turning them into programmable killers who followed orders without question. The leader then broke the metal collar around the girl's neck. She immediately snapped out of her trance. He reassured her, explaining what had happened, and told her that he wouldn't abandon her. Instead, she would join them on their journey. The girl agreed and went with him. He took her to the hotel and introduced her to the rest of the group, telling them that her name was Misha. Everyone welcomed her warmly. Meanwhile, Pascal spoke with Emilio and told him that he had to return to the royal palace because there were some things in the laboratory that he needed to complete his research. But after that, he would catch up with them right away and wouldn't take long. The next day, they all stood together and said their goodbyes. After Pascal left, the group continued on their journey. They boarded a ship that could barely be called seaworthy, and Sean was completely baffled as to how this ship was supposed to carry them or even move 2 steps. But Alicia told him to stay optimistic and gave him a push to get on board. They set sail, and Felix and Misha immediately started arguing. Both of them kept showing off their powerful weapons, especially Felix. Everyone was surprised that Felix was making such a big deal out of it, especially since Misha turned out to be stronger than him, even she admitted it. Meanwhile, Emilio went to speak with the leader, feeling nauseous from seasickness. He asked him how he planned to tame the Zuzian. The leader told him that he wasn't going to tame them because they weren't animals, he was going to talk to them and convince them. Emilio argued that the Zuzians had killed so many of their allies and that he doubted they would even let them speak. But the leader told him that not all of them were the same, and many of them were just like them. He was completely confident in his words. Besides, the Zuzians' island was isolated, a place where they had been exiled to keep them away from the world. Entering and leaving was incredibly difficult, almost like a prison created by nature itself. Emilio then asked how they were supposed to reach it if it was practically a prison. The leader told him that it would definitely be difficult for a spoiled prince like him. But before Emilio could respond, his nausea got worse, and he walked away without a word. That night, a violent storm struck, and the ship was completely unstable. Both Emilio and Sean were terrified, constantly slipping and nearly falling off the ship, with different members of the group saving them each time. By morning, they finally reached the island, but the ship barely made it, arriving in a wrecked state. Elogia told the leader that the ship was now unusable and that if they didn't reach an agreement with the Zuzians, this would be the end of their journey. At that moment, the Zuzians appeared, but before the leader could even open his mouth to speak, They restrained all of them and lined them up in front of the Xizian leader, Gerardo. They asked him why he had come to their island. The leader told them that he needed their strength to overthrow the king. Gerardo then asked what he could offer in return for that. The leader told him, freedom and dignity. He promised that once the king was gone, they would be free. But Gerardo scoffed at him, saying he would never believe a promise made by an Andreas. Sean then asked Elogia why the Xizians seemed to resent the Andreas so much. Elogia explained that, long ago, the Andreas had used the Xizian's strength for labor. Those who became exhausted or fell ill were exiled to this island. That was why they hated the Andreas so much, because they had been treated as little more than slaves. Gerardo then told the leader that if he was willing to offer his own life in exchange for the war they were about to start, he would join them and help overthrow the king, but only under the leadership of someone other than him. The leader thought for a moment and then agreed, saying he was willing to do anything to ensure the war happened. But the moment Gerardo ordered one of his soldiers to execute the leader, Louis intervened and saved him. The rest of the group also stepped forward, offering their own lives in exchange for the leaders. Seeing this, Gerardo pulled the leader aside to speak with him. At that moment, the leader told Gerardo that he had no intention of waging a war where people would die just to remove the king. His plan was to gather a force so large and powerful that they would be able to overthrow the king or negotiate with him without bloodshed. Gerardo was greatly convinced by the leader's words. He realized that he was different from any other Andreas he had ever met and agreed to join them. Meanwhile, another faction of Xizians who were still loyal to the royal army had been raising a bird trained to carry messages. When they received news from the bird that Gerardo had joined the leader, one of them suggested that they should deal with this situation themselves, without informing the king. After the leader finished his discussions with the Xizians and they agreed to his terms, they continued their journey north. Gerardo provided them with a massive ship, one that was 100 times better than the one they had arrived in, to ensure they reached the north safely. He told the leader that if anything happened, he should contact him immediately. He then handed him a small object that, when held, would summon the Andorra bird, which would serve as their means of communication and deliver their messages. After saying their farewells to the Xizians, they boarded the ship and sailed north. When they arrived, the leader met with some of his allies there. They told him that they had gathered a large number of people from the north who were willing to join his revolution. With that, there was a high possibility that they could remove the king without the need for war. A wave of hope and optimism spread among them. However, Emilio remained determined to kill the king himself. When Sean saw how fixated Emilio was on this, he became curious about why he hated the king so much. He went up to him and asked directly, but Emilio dismissed him, saying there was no reason for him to explain. But Sean kept pestering him until Emilio finally got tired of it and decided to tell him. He explained that the king was the one who had killed his real father. On top of that, after he had grown close to Pascal and found someone who filled the void in his life, the king banished Pascal, leaving him alone once again. Revenge was the only thing on his mind. He then asked Sean what he would do if he were in his place. Sean told him that if someone had killed his father, his only thought would be revenge. But the one thing that could stop him was his mother, because he wouldn't want to hurt her, nor would he want to become a killer in her eyes and end up in prison, leaving her behind. Just like he had his mother as a reason not to act on vengeance, Emilio had Pascal and Alicia. Before they could continue their conversation, the group called for them to keep moving. They climbed a snowy mountain, and as they did, Sean noticed enormous footprints. When he asked whose they were, the leader told him they belonged to a dragon. Sean was terrified. As Elogia approached to reassure him, he suddenly fell into a deep pit. Meanwhile, Pascal had arrived at the royal palace. He entered his old office to retrieve some books, but there, he encountered a young scientist who was shocked to see him. The scientist was a huge admirer of Pascal and eagerly spoke with him. During their conversation, he revealed that he was the one who had solved Babel's issue and had informed his superior, who then relayed the information to the king. Now, they were all heading toward Babel. Back with the group, after Elogia fell into the pit, they quickly rushed to rescue him. Once they confirmed he was safe, they continued walking through the pit. But suddenly, they were attacked by a massive dragon. They tried to flee in the opposite direction, only to find another dragon blocking their path. They were completely surrounded. Alicia was terrified, but then Flareon transformed into a dragon himself, causing the massive dragon to stop its attack. When he returned to Alicia and she touched him, she was shocked to hear him speak. Strangely, only she, Sean, and Emilio could hear him. Flareon told her that he was the soul of her late father, placed within him so that he could always be with her. Alicia asked him how her father had died. He explained that he had been a hunter. One day, while battling monsters, his powerful weapon grew stronger, something that only happened when its wielder's fear and sense of danger increased. But in exchange, the weapon drained an immense amount of energy and life force from its user. Over time, he became greedy, obsessed with making his weapon stronger and stronger, until it ultimately cost him his life. However, he reassured her that he would always stay by her side. After that, Flareon returned to his normal form, and the dragons that had been attacking them stopped. Not only that, but they even began assisting them. Seeing the opportunity, the leader had everyone ride the dragons so they could reach their destination much faster. But the dragons could only take them close to Babel, as they couldn't go any further due to their fear of the hunters. So, the group set up a fire and gathered around it to figure out their next move. At that moment, Elogia suddenly collapsed, unconscious. When he woke up, he told them he had seen the future, looking extremely distressed. They asked him what exactly he had seen, and he told them he saw Andorra being destroyed, with all of the crystal's energy completely gone. But surprisingly, none of them seemed particularly worried or afraid of witnessing the end of their world. At the same time, the king was on his way to Babel. He stopped to camp briefly, and the head of the laboratory approached him, telling him that they would finally be able to fix the city's issue as soon as they arrived. However, he was still curious about why the king was so insistent and in such a rush to repair Babel. But the king refused to answer and dismissed him. At that moment, the Zuzian warrior who had attacked Sean, named Ibelda, arrived with his group. They informed the king about the leader and Emilio and that they had allied with the Zuzian leader. However, the king quickly noticed that Ibelda was injured, realizing that he had disobeyed orders and engaged in a fight with Emilio. He reminded Ibelda that his only task had been to observe Emilio, not to fight him. He warned him that if this happened again, the consequences would not be favorable. Ibelda and his group left, frustrated and resentful toward the king, questioning why they were still serving him at all. They also overheard some royal guards speaking badly about the Zuzians, calling them monsters. Meanwhile, Pascal was still in the library, searching for any book that contained information about Babel. But to his surprise, there wasn't a single useful one. This was highly unusual, meaning that the king had likely gotten rid of every book that could provide answers. Pascal realized that the only way to get the answer he was looking for was from the king himself. He needed to ask him why he wanted to open Babel so badly. At that moment, the young scientist who had solved Babel's problem approached him and told him that he had activated a device he had invented some time ago. It would analyze Andorra's energy, and the results would be available by tomorrow. Meanwhile, Emilio and Sean slept in the same tent. Taking advantage of the moment, Sean told Emilio before he fell asleep that he needed to think carefully about killing the king. It wasn't right to take revenge by killing someone. The next morning, Emilio and Sean woke up to find Alicia telling them that other kingdoms had agreed to join their revolution. This meant they would become incredibly strong, and their uprising could succeed without war. But Emilio still told them that even if that was the case, he would kill the king anyway. Sean, frustrated, told him that his hatred would lead him to the same fate as Alicia's father. His weapon would absorb all the energy from his hatred, and he would die. Emilio became furious and shouted that Sean didn't understand anything. He told him that he would leave soon and return to his world, so he had no right to interfere with what he planned to do. Angry, Sean attacked him, hitting him to snap him out of it. Meanwhile, Pascal received the energy analysis results and was shocked to find that Andorra's energy levels were critically low. The young scientist also surprised him by showing him old energy reports. Pascal discovered that Andorra's energy levels had only started declining after Daizilon took the throne, meaning the two events were undoubtedly connected. Pascal then told Joseph, the scientist, that they needed to get to Babel as quickly as possible because the king had likely arrived by now, and they had to stop him from opening Babel's gate. Joseph led him to a hidden section of the laboratory and revealed an advanced aircraft he had built. It was extremely fast and could get them to Babel in a very short time. They boarded and took off toward their destination. By that point, the king had already reached Babel, while Sean, Emilio, and their group were on their way. Within a short time, they would arrive as well. As soon as they arrived at Babel's gates, they found that there were 4 doors, but only one of them would lead them to the city. Elogia used his abilities and told them that the 4th door was the right one. They all followed his advice and entered the 4th door, but once inside, they discovered that they needed to find a key to open the path to the city. Fortunately, they didn't have to search for long. Emilio quickly found the key. The moment he removed it from its place, a passage opened before them. They walked through it for a while, and Misha made sure there were no traps along the way. Eventually, they came across a towering wall that they needed to climb. They all started scaling it, but exhaustion set in as they climbed higher. When they finally reached the top, they realized they had to descend and climb another wall to reach their destination. They threw down a rope to descend, and one by one, they made their way down, until only Emilio and the leader were left. At that moment, the leader told him that their revolution would no longer involve killing the king, as they had originally planned. They now had enough power to negotiate with the king and make him do what they wanted. But Emilio refused. saying that no matter what happened, he would kill the king. The leader, unable to understand him, asked why he was so intent on taking revenge against his father. That's when Emilio revealed the truth, that the king was not his real father. He told him everything from the beginning. But the leader didn't care about any of that and simply told him not to raise his sword against Daizilon until he had spoken with him first. Emilio didn't respond. He simply descended the wall and continued onward. They navigated through many paths to reach Babel. At that moment, all Sean could think about was how, once he reached Babel, he would finally return to his world, before the king carried out his unknown plan, the one he had gone to such great lengths to complete. But for the first time, he wasn't happy about it. He didn't want to leave Andorra. He wanted to help Emilio and stay with them until their fight was over. He was torn, unsure of what to do. As they reached a chamber, Elogia told them that the rock in front of them would lead them directly to a door, and from there, they would reach Babel. But before they could move toward it, Ibelda and his Zuzian warriors appeared, blocking the leader from entering the city. A fierce battle broke out. Ibelda went straight for Emilio, intent on killing him. He told him that his father had ordered him not to harm him, but this time, he was going to break that order just for the fun of it. Ibelda's words completely stunned Emilio, making it hard for him to focus on the fight. Sean quickly rushed to his aid, helping him push Ibelda away. Emilio then ran toward the rock to enter Babel, with Sean and Alicia following closely behind, unwilling to leave him alone. But just then, a betrayal within the leader's group was revealed. Lewis was fighting alongside the rogue Zuzians. She had been a spy all along. She had done everything for money, willing to side with whoever paid her the most. She didn't care about the revolution because she was convinced it would fail. She was certain that they wouldn't be able to do anything, nor would they ever bring freedom and dignity to the Zuzians, as they had promised. When she tried to kill Elogia, the leader stepped in, telling her to kill him instead. She charged at him with her weapon, aiming to finish him off with all her strength, but she failed. Meanwhile, Emilio had reached another chamber leading to Babel. There, he found the king. The head of the laboratory told the king that the gate would open for a short period in just a few minutes before closing again. They needed to enter the gate quickly during that window of time. But just before the gate opened, Emilio arrived and started fighting with the king. Both of them clashed fiercely. Meanwhile, outside, Lewis was still fighting the leader, determined to kill him, while Ibelda was trying to enter Babel as well. Seeing this, the leader ordered Felix and Misha to stop him and prevent him from reaching the city. The leader then tried to talk to Lewis, telling her that he couldn't believe she was truly a traitor. He was convinced that she couldn't have spent all this time with them pretending, especially since she had saved him from the Zuzians when they had tried to kill him. He asked her to explain the real reason, but she said nothing. Instead, she simply kept attacking him with her weapon, trying to kill him. But the leader stood still, unmoving, completely certain that she wouldn't be able to go through with her orders. And just as he expected, the moment she realized he wasn't resisting, she couldn't bring herself to do it. She broke down in tears, apologizing to him. She admitted that she had been a spy, but after spending time with the group, she had come to love them. At first, she had thought they were just a bunch of savages, but she had been wrong. As she cried, Elogia walked over and handed her a handkerchief, telling her that the past didn't matter anymore, and they forgave her. Meanwhile, Ibelda was still locked in battle with Felix and Misha, who were keeping him from reaching Babel. But in the chaos, Misha accidentally hit him with one of her arrows, causing him to fall toward the teleportation mark. The moment he stepped on it, he was instantly transported to Babel, disappearing before they could stop him. At that moment, Sean and Alicia finally arrived, just as Emilio was still trying to kill the king. They both tried to stop him, telling him not to do it. But it was no use. Emilio kept fighting, yelling at the king that he had taken everything from him and had killed his father. But when the king heard those words, he was completely shocked. At that moment, the head of the laboratory activated Babel, opening the gate to the surface. Sean immediately intervened, stepping between them to stop the fight. He told the king that if he truly loved Emilio and had raised him, then he had to tell him now why he had killed his real father. But before the king could answer, they were all taken by surprise when Ibelda suddenly entered Babel. He launched an attack on Emilio, determined to finish him off. When the king ordered him to stop, Ibelda ignored him and continued striking Emilio, intending to kill him. Sean tried to stop him as well, but he couldn't overpower Ibelda either. In the end, the king himself moved to save Emilio. But just as he was about to draw his weapon, Ibelda drove his sword straight into the king's heart. The king collapsed to the ground. Ibelda was overjoyed, victorious at last. He declared that he had always wanted to see the surface, to finally be free from all the orders and restrictions placed upon him in Andorra. He would now live as he pleased. Without hesitation, he rushed through the gate before anyone could stop him. But at that moment, the gate suddenly turned red and immediately shut down. Meanwhile, Emilio, seeing the king die before his eyes, was in complete shock. For the first time, he admitted to the king that he loved him like a father. He broke down, crying over him as he took his last breath. By the time Pascal and Joseph arrived, they were stunned to see that Babel had been activated and the king was dead. They hadn't made it in time to ask him why he had reactivated the city. The leader and the rest of the group also arrived, only to be met with the same devastating sight. Everyone stood frozen in shock, especially the leader and the group, as they had no idea what to do next now that their revolution had essentially failed after the king's death. The leader told them that, yes, their revolution had failed, but there were still many problems ahead that they needed to solve. However, they would think about them later, once things had settled down. Meanwhile, Emilio went off on his own, feeling troubled. Sean followed him, trying to talk to him and pull him out of the bad mood he was in. Emilio told him that he was completely confused about his emotions. His sole purpose from the beginning had been to kill the king, but now that Ibelda had done it instead, he didn't understand why he didn't feel victorious or happy. At the same time, he responded to himself, saying that maybe he felt this way because he wasn't the one who had killed the king with his own hands. At that moment, Sean apologized to him for failing to keep the promise he had made at the very beginning, when he had told him he would help him kill the king. Emilio also apologized, telling him that he had promised to help him return to his world. But now, Babel had shut down, the king was dead, and they had no way of sending him back. After that, Emilio told him that something strange had happened while he was fighting the king. He had tried to remember what his real father looked like, but he couldn't. The only image he could see was Daizilon in his father's place. He also told Sean that he had been wrong not to listen to Pascal when he had tried to make him see reason. Pascal had told him that he needed to go and ask the king for the truth himself. At that time, Pascal had been trying to wake him up, but instead, he had stubbornly followed his own thoughts, refusing to listen. And now, the result was that he didn't know what he wanted anymore. He wasn't even sure if the king had truly killed his real father or not. And the biggest question now was, why had Daizilon opened the gate? Why had he wanted to go to the surface? All of these questions could have been answered by Daizilon himself. But it was too late. Daizilon was gone. Sean then took Emilio for a walk, leading him out of the maze of Babel. He tried his best to comfort Emilio. They recalled all the crazy moments they had shared, the times they had fought and couldn't stand each other. They both started laughing. Emilio then asked Sean if he wasn't upset that he wouldn't be able to return to his world. Sean told him that Babel couldn't possibly be the only way back. There had to be other ways. Besides, now he would get to spend more time with them. That way, when he eventually returned, he would have something to tell his family, or maybe even write a book about it and become famous. Either way, he was winning. At that moment, Alicia arrived, urging them to hurry up and leave the maze because they had already taken too long. But Sean didn't seem to care. He wasn't upset at all about not returning. Instead, he started playing around, swinging on the rope they were using to climb down the maze wall. He made Emilio copy him, and the three of them burst into laughter. But before they left, they all waited for Pascal to finish investigating what had happened and figure out the reason why the gate had shut down. However, Joseph, the young scientist with him, couldn't find any answers. They still had no idea what had caused the issue. Even when they tried to reactivate the gate, it wouldn't work. At that moment, Sean and Alicia arrived and spoke with Pascal. Pascal apologized to Sean for failing to send him back to his world. But Sean didn't mind and instead asked Pascal about Emilio and how he could lift his spirits. Pascal told him that Emilio needed something to distract him so that he wouldn't dwell too much on everything that had happened. Meanwhile, Emilio was speaking with the leader, telling him that the reason he had come here was now gone, and the revolution had failed as well. So, what do we do now? He asked. The leader told him that, yes, the revolution had failed, but the main goal they had wanted to achieve was only just beginning. Now that the king was dead, Andorra would experience chaos like never before in its history. They needed to take control of it. The coming days would be extremely difficult, and they had to prepare for them. They would leave immediately and return to Andorra as soon as Pascal was finished. After that, the leader left, and Sean went to Emilio. He pulled out his weapon and told Emilio to spar with him. But Emilio wasn't in the mood and told Sean to train on his own. Sean, however, kept pestering him and provoking him until Emilio finally drew his weapon as well. The two of them fought until they were both exhausted. Eventually, Emilio got fed up and landed the finishing blow on Sean, knocking him to the ground and winning the fight. But when Sean saw that Emilio was still sulking, he told him that he was a very gloomy prince and that he looked terrible with that frown on his face. He told him that he couldn't stay like this forever and needed to think about what his next goal should be. For the first time, Emilio actually thought about Sean's words and realized he was right. He needed to find a new purpose to strive for. Meanwhile, Louis went to the leader because the Andorra bird, which the Zuzian leader had created for communication, had brought her a message. It told her that the Zuzians' island was now under siege and that they needed help. Louis asked to rejoin the group so she could help them, but no one was willing to trust her, except for Elogia and the leader. They told Louis that she was one of them and that they would always trust her. However, Felix and Misha warned her that they would be keeping an eye on her, in case she tried anything. At that moment, Emilio approached the leader as well and told him that his new goal was to officially join their group and become one of them, helping them with whatever they needed to accomplish. The entire group welcomed Emilio warmly, telling him that from the very beginning, they had always felt like he was one of them. Sean, excited, said that if Emilio was joining, then he wanted to join too. But they all told him that he was useless and wouldn't be of any help. Still, they agreed to let him stay with them until he found a way to return to his world. At the very least, he could spread some of his overwhelming positive energy around. In one of the villages, crime had increased, and people were taking advantage of King Dieselin's death to do whatever they wanted without facing any punishment. In this particular village, a cruel and oppressive man of high status led his guards in an attack, stealing everything from the villagers: food, water, and money. No one dared to stop them. Even when the villagers tried to resist or begged them to stop, they were beaten without mercy. But fortunately for the villagers, the leader and the group were passing through on their way back from Babel. Seeing the injustice unfolding, they immediately intervened and fought the rich man's guards to prevent them from robbing the village. They succeeded in driving them away, but the rich man managed to escape with a few of his remaining guards, retreating to his mansion. The villagers were immensely grateful to the leader and invited him and the group to have lunch with them. They apologized for the small amount of food they could offer, but it was clear that the villagers were still anxious and afraid. The leader asked them what was wrong. An elderly man among them explained that while they had stopped the attack for now, as soon as they left, the rich man would return to raid them again, making their efforts meaningless. Emilio then spoke with the leader, convincing him that they should go to the rich man themselves and talk to him directly to stop him from harming the villagers after they left. Everyone agreed with the idea. At that moment, the old man saw something in Emilio. He saw the presence of a king and a leader. The next day, they all headed to the rich man's mansion. But the moment they entered, they found no guards, no security, nothing at all. The place was eerily quiet, and no one stopped them or even acknowledged their presence. When they stepped inside the mansion, they saw the rich man sitting in fear. The more they spoke to him, the more terrified he became. Sean and Emilio, annoyed, asked him why he was so scared. But before the man could answer, a sword suddenly plunged into his back while he sat in his chair. Emerging from behind the chair was a shocking revelation. Ibelda had returned. Everyone was in complete disbelief. Ibelda was supposed to be either dead from the gate's red radiation or stuck on the surface. But Ibelda wasted no time. He immediately launched an attack, going after all of them at once. Strangely, he was far stronger than before, so strong that none of them could keep up with him. When Sean and Emilio tried to set a trap, planning for one of them to distract him while the other struck from behind, something horrifying happened. The moment they executed their plan, more monstrous creatures emerged from within Ibelda, and the more they defeated, the more kept appearing. Realizing they couldn't keep up, they all retreated outside the mansion. Ibelda rushed straight for the leader, knocking him down, ready to finish him off. But just in time, Gerardo, who had once been Ibelda's friend, appeared to punish the traitor. He was the only one who could overpower Ibelda. Gerardo defeated Ibelda, saving the leader. At that moment, the leader realized that Gerardo was a noble Zuzian. He offered him a place in their group. Gerardo agreed but said he would only join them temporarily, until they had rescued the Zuzian's island. The leader accepted, and everyone warmly welcomed him. During this time, rumors began to spread rapidly. Many people gathered the villagers and townsfolk to tell them terrible things about King Dieselon, claiming that he had abandoned them, fled to a faraway place, and left Andorra vulnerable to attacks and looting from other kingdoms. A few days later, Gerardo escaped from his island to meet with the leader and plan how they would liberate the island. He successfully met with the leader and the group on a ship, where he informed them that about 5 ships from the invading army were surrounding the island, waiting for the right moment to strike. They needed to come up with a strategy quickly before the attackers made their move. At that moment, they heard the sounds of fighting outside. When they stepped out, they saw that Gerardo was in the middle of a heated fight with Felix and Misha. The three of them couldn't stand each other. Gerardo quickly stopped Gerardo and told them that he had an important announcement. He was officially joining the leader's faction as one of the Ignatus. The leader was thrilled and told him that they couldn't have asked for a stronger ally to join their ranks. Afterward, they returned inside, where Pascal had something important to tell them about Babel. He entered with Joseph, who explained that they had finally figured out why Ibelda had turned into a monster and why he had never made it to the surface. The issue wasn't with Babel itself but with the surface gate, which was malfunctioning. Both gates needed to be opened simultaneously in order for Sean to return to his world. However, there was a bigger problem. The energy levels of Andorra were rapidly declining. If they didn't find a solution, their world would be destroyed, and Elogia's vision would come true. After Pascal finished explaining the situation, the leader and Gerardo finalized their plan for the upcoming battle. The next day, the leader and Gerardo boarded the ship of the enemy commander attacking the Zuzian's island. They attempted to negotiate peacefully, asking him to withdraw his fleet. However, the commander refused to take them seriously. He mocked them, pointing out that they were just 2 men standing against 100 soldiers. But the leader simply smirked and told him that 2 were more than enough. It turned out that he had already spread his group across all 5 enemy ships. Within moments, the ships were destroyed, including the commander's own vessel. The invaders were completely wiped out, and the island was successfully liberated. Standing at a distance, they watched as the freed Zuzians celebrated. Gerardito was overjoyed, and afterward, they all went to his home to figure out their next steps. While there, they met Gerardito's young son, Karam. However, the moment Karam saw Sean and Emilio, he burst into tears, terrified of them. Not wanting to upset the child, they quietly stepped away. Later, Emilio approached Pascal and asked if he had discovered anything about why Daizilon had opened Babel's Gate. Pascal told him that he had a theory, though he wasn't completely sure. He suspected that Daizilon had been trying to meet someone important from the surface, which was why he had wanted to open the gate. Emilio tried to think if he knew who that person could be, but he couldn't come up with anything. The next day, Gerardito, the leader, and the rest of the group prepared themselves, boarded their ship, and set sail once again, continuing their journey to save Andorra. Throughout their journey, the group continued to help people and reduce the corruption that had spread as much as they could. Eventually, they arrived at the capital and the royal palace. Sean was completely mesmerized by the sight of the castle. He told Emilio that when they had escaped from it last time, he hadn't gotten a good look at it. If he had, he wouldn't have run away at all. Inside the palace, the moment people heard that Emilio had arrived, they couldn't believe it. All the servants and guards rushed toward him. The 2 maids who had raised him were overjoyed to see him alive, and Aaron, the commander of the royal guards, was equally relieved, but then immediately asked about the large group of people he had brought with him. Emilio told him that they were his friends, people he had gained during his journey. As they all entered the palace, Emilio found himself flooded with memories of his childhood. However, they had barely been there for 5 minutes before Aaron and the guards got into a conflict with Felix and Misha, as they didn't trust them. When Emilio intervened to ask what was going on, Aaron told him that Misha and Felix had been walking around the palace suspiciously. Emilio assured him that they were his friends and that he had nothing to worry about. They wouldn't cause any harm to the palace. Still, Aaron remained wary and requested that Emilio keep them from getting too comfortable. Meanwhile, Pascal and Joseph were thrilled to return to their laboratory. But the moment they arrived, they were shocked to find books and equipment scattered all over the floor. No one had valued the knowledge stored in those books. Soon after, Roni arrived, the man who had once been Pascal's teacher. Together, Roni, Joseph, and Pascal formed an unstoppable trio of scientists. As for Emilio, he wandered the palace, feeling deeply saddened. When he reached Dieselin's throne, memories of the king came rushing back, making him feel even worse. The leader approached him and subtly hinted that the throne needed someone like him to take it after the king. Emilio understood what he was implying but admitted that, during his journey, he had realized how little he actually knew about the country he lived in. He was afraid that he wasn't worthy of such responsibility. That night, the palace guards gathered under Aaron's command after discovering that monsters had appeared in the nearby forest. However, the guards were terrified. They whispered among themselves that they should flee, as fighting the monsters would be meaningless. After all, there was no king anymore, and destruction was inevitable. At the very least, they could save their own lives now. Aaron was stunned by their words. He reminded them that they had a duty to defend their capital, even if it meant dying in the process. At that moment, the leader and his group stepped forward, telling Aaron and the guards to step aside. They would handle the monsters themselves. It turned out that the creatures attacking them were the same monsters that had once belonged to Ibelda. And not only that, Ibelda himself had returned. He had somehow survived. It was as if he had 7 lives. Now, he had come for revenge. A fierce battle broke out, but the group found themselves overwhelmed, struggling to fight both the monsters and Ibelda at the same time. Seeing their struggle, Aaron and the leader decided to work together. The guards joined the battle, fighting alongside them. Meanwhile, Sean, Emilio, and Gerardo took on Ibelda directly. Together, they managed to strike a critical blow, destroying one of Ibelda's eyes. Realizing he was at a disadvantage, Ibelda retreated along with his monsters before they could finish him off. Gerardo wasn't convinced that Ibelda was truly gone, so he asked the leader for permission to go after him and finish him off. However, the leader warned him that Ibelda was extremely dangerous and that he wouldn't be able to handle him alone. To ensure his safety, the leader sent Felix and Misha to accompany him. Even then, Emilio felt that it still wasn't enough, so he assigned a group of royal guards to go with them. Without wasting any time, they set off in search of Ibelda. Meanwhile, at the laboratory, Pascal discovered that the declining energy levels had started to severely impact Andorra. The land was suffering from drought, and agriculture was deteriorating, making it an even greater problem for the leader, who felt helpless in the face of the growing crisis. At the same time, Emilio took Sean to the palace dungeon, telling him that the gate had first opened in this very place. He suggested that if there was any way back, it might be from the same location. However, when Sean climbed up to a high point in the dungeon, he looked down and saw nothing. The pit below was deep and covered in darkness, making it impossible to see anything. Curious, Emilio climbed up as well to get a better look. But as soon as he stepped forward, his foot slipped. Sean tried to grab him, but instead, they both lost their balance and fell. Luckily, there was a ledge beneath them, breaking their fall before they could reach the bottom of the pit. Though they were unharmed, the distance between them and the surface was too great to climb back up. With no other option, they decided to descend further down the ledge. As they made their way deeper, they stumbled upon countless skeletons and corpses. It was Emilio's first time seeing such a place, and the eerie silence around them only made it more unsettling. Suddenly, a monstrous Zuzian appeared before them, bound in chains. Emilio cautiously approached and asked who he was and why he was there. The creature introduced himself as Raffle. When he learned that Emilio was the son of the king, he immediately showed him respect. Raffle then recounted his story, revealing that he had once been the right-hand man of King Azam, Emilio's real father. But everything had changed when a certain man arrived. According to Raffle, this man, a stranger from the surface, had met the king and slowly influenced him in ways that would change Andorra forever. Sean immediately asked if the man he was talking about was Daizilan, but Raffle shook his head. It wasn't Daizilan. Raffle explained that years ago, Azam and Daizilan had found an unconscious man from the surface. Once they confirmed he was alive, they took him to the palace, where he began speaking to King Azam about the advanced technology of the surface world. Azam, being highly ambitious and obsessed with power, was immediately drawn to the stranger's words. The man claimed to be a scientist from the surface and began supplying Azam with weapons and advanced tools, proving to him that the power of the surface far surpassed that of Andorra. Over time, the king became completely engrossed in the scientist's ideas, refusing to listen to anyone else. One day, the scientist approached Azam with a new proposition. He wanted to extract some of Andorra's energy to help solve the problems of the surface, such as wildfires and droughts. If Azam agreed, the people of the surface would revere him and his name would be remembered in history. Shockingly, Azam agreed without hesitation. Daizilan and Raffle, however, strongly opposed the idea, warning the king that tampering with Andorra's energy would lead to disaster. But Azam refused to listen to them, silencing their protests. Determined to stop whatever was happening, Raffle decided to confront the scientist directly. He suspected the man had ulterior motives, so he threatened him, demanding that he stay away from the king. However, the scientist was cunning. He intentionally wounded himself and called for the guards, making it look as though Raffle had tried to kill him. As a result, Azam was furious and sentenced Raffle to be executed by throwing him into the pit. Luckily, he survived the fall. Sean, now more curious than ever, asked Raffle if he remembered the scientist's name, but Raffle couldn't recall it. However, as he examined Sean more closely, something clicked. He noticed that Sean's appearance was different from everyone else. He looked just like the scientist from the surface. Realizing that Sean was from the surface, Raffle was suddenly overcome with rage. His fury caused the chains binding him to snap, and he lunged at Sean with uncontrollable anger. Terrified, Sean instinctively tried to summon his weapon, but instead of appearing, his crystal reacted on its own. A portal immediately formed, and in an instant, both Sean and Emilio were transported to the surface. Sean and Emilio were completely shocked by what had just happened. However, while Sean quickly became excited and overjoyed, Emilio remained frozen in disbelief. Without wasting any time, Sean grabbed Emilio and took him to his home. When his mother opened the door, she couldn't believe her eyes. Her son was safe and standing right in front of her. However, she immediately noticed Emilio and asked who he was. Sean introduced him as his friend, and they both stepped inside. As they sat down, Sean began telling his mother everything that had happened, from the very beginning to the moment they returned. Surprisingly, his mother wasn't shocked. She explained that she and his father had suspected something like this had happened, especially after the crystal had disappeared. The only thing that had worried them was not knowing when or if Sean would return. To celebrate his homecoming, they decided to order sushi, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sean was finally going to eat normal food again. However, when the food arrived, Emilio was completely stunned. Everything looked bizarre to him: the plates, the food, the house, and even the entire world around him. Sean reassured him, telling him that the next day, they would visit his father, the scientist who had been working on the crystal, to figure out a way to send him back to Andorra. That night, they stayed up late, talking and enjoying themselves. Sean's mother even showed Emilio pictures of Sean as a child. One particular photo caught Emilio's attention, but before he could get a good look at it, Sean quickly snatched it away, embarrassed, saying it was too humiliating. The next day, they headed to Hazenja Company and entered the office. Sean immediately started explaining everything to his father, telling him that they needed to return Emilio to Andorra as soon as possible. His father reassured Emilio, telling him that their research was highly advanced and that it wouldn't take long to send him back. Emilio thanked him, but deep inside, he felt something strange, an unsettling feeling he couldn't quite explain. As they left the company, Emilio suddenly stopped in his tracks, frozen in shock. Sean called out to him, but Emilio didn't respond. At that moment, his mind was flooded with memories that had once been lost to him. He was trying to recall his childhood, the parts that had always seemed blurry and incomplete. But now, at last, everything became clear. He remembered a young boy being kidnapped from the palace. He remembered the face of his father, King Azam. And then came the biggest shock of all. He remembered the evil man who had once been his father's companion. That man was Hazenja. But the most earth-shattering revelation came when Emilio pieced everything together. Because when he recalled the kidnapped child's face, he also remembered the photo he had seen at Sean's house, the one Sean had quickly hidden from him. It was the same boy. Sean was the kidnapped child, and the one who had kidnapped him was Hazenja. Without hesitation, Emilio turned back and stormed into Hazenja's office. He confronted him with everything he had just remembered, but instead of denying it, Hazenja didn't even try to argue. Instead, he calmly reached for his gun, pointed it at them, and said, "Sean, I am not your real father." When Hazenja attempted to kill Emilio, he and Sean quickly fled. As they escaped, Hazenja sat alone, reflecting on his past. It was then that the truth behind everything was revealed. Years ago, when Hazenja first learned about Andorra's energy, he became obsessed with the idea of taking it for himself. He wanted to return to the surface as the greatest scientist in history. He frequently traveled between the surface and Andorra, using the knowledge he gained to further his plans. One day, he returned home to his wife, Sean's mother, who was pregnant at the time. He told her about the crystal she had discovered, explaining that it had transported him to Andorra. He shared every detail of what he had seen. However, that same night, his wife suddenly fell critically ill. The child she had been carrying did not survive. Overwhelmed with grief, Hazenja returned to Andorra, more determined than ever to complete his twisted ambitions. On one occasion, he was having dinner with King Azam and Daizilan. He eagerly described the advanced technology of the surface and showered the king with extravagant gifts. These gifts dazzled Azam, making him blind to the concerns of Daizilan, who constantly warned him that exposing Andorra to the surface world was a grave mistake. But then, the king said something that changed everything. He revealed that Daizilan's son was gravely ill and that only the technology of the surface could save him. Hearing this, Hazenja saw an opportunity. He told the king that if he helped him with his plans, he would provide the technology they needed to cure the boy. Daizilan, desperate to save his son, didn't hesitate. He handed his child over to Hazenja, trusting him to take the boy to the surface for treatment and bring him back once he was healed. That child was Sean. But Hazenja never returned him. The reason? Sean's mother had grown attached to him and refused to let him go. At the same time, Hazenja had also come to love him as if he were his own son. Meanwhile, Hazenja returned to Andorra, where he killed King Azam and destroyed Babel. When Daizilan arrived, hoping to save the king, it was already too late. He confronted Hazenja, demanding to know where his son was. But Hazenja only laughed and told him, "If you want your son back, come to the surface and take him yourself." That was why Daizilan had spent all those years desperately trying to repair Babel. He was trying to reunite with his son. But before he could, Hazenja cut off all communication with Andorra. He destroyed Babel completely and used his last remaining crystal to escape to the surface, taking a portion of Andorra's energy with him. That night, after returning to Sean's house, Emilio shared everything he had remembered. He told Sean that he finally remembered everything, and there was one last shocking truth. The kidnapped child was Daizilan's son, which meant that Sean was Emilio's cousin. Sean woke up the next day feeling completely devastated. The truth he had learned the night before weighed heavily on him, leaving him in shock. Seeing how broken he was, Emilio became worried and decided to confront Hazenja himself. The first question Emilio asked when he arrived was simple yet crucial. Did Hazenja truly love Sean? Hazenja looked at him seriously and replied, "I love Sean deeply. He will always be my son, no matter what." Hearing this, Emilio told him that if he truly loved Sean, he needed to talk to him. He then made a deal with Hazenja, agreeing to bring Sean so they could have a real conversation. Hazenja agreed without hesitation. However, before Emilio left, he asked him one more thing. Why did he kill King Azam? Hazenja sighed and explained that Azam had never deserved to be king. He was weak, constantly swayed by the words of others, and had betrayed many people for his own selfish desires. That was why Hazenja had killed him. In his eyes, Daizilan was a far better ruler than Azam ever was. Emilio was left speechless. This revelation only made him more conflicted about his father, filling him with a sense of sorrow and doubt. He left Hazenja's office feeling even more lost than before. Meanwhile, back in Andorra, everyone was searching for Emilio and Sean. The only clue they had was that both of them had vanished inside the palace dungeon. Alicia, however, recalled something important. Emilio had once told her that when he first met Sean had appeared in the dungeon. That meant something similar must have happened again. At this point, Pascal, along with Joseph and Roni, conducted thorough research, analyzing what had happened. Eventually, they discovered a potential explanation. Pascal explained to the group that Sean might have been transported to their world through an ancient artifact once known as the Blue Crystal. This crystal had long ago served as a gateway between Andorra and the surface, which meant that if it had sent Sean to their world before, it could have sent both him and Emilio back to the surface this time. Back in the surface world, Emilio returned home and sat down with Sean, encouraging him to meet Hazenja face to face. Despite everything he had learned, Sean still loved his family deeply. Even after hearing the truth about his father's past, he decided to give him one last chance and agreed to meet him. The two of them arrived at the meeting place Emilio had arranged, and Sean immediately confronted Hazenja. "Do you consider me your son?" Sean asked. Without hesitation, Hazenja answered, "You are my son, and you will always be my son, no matter what happens." Sean stared at him for a moment before speaking again. "If that's true, then you have to stop what you're doing to Andorra." Hazenja, confused, asked him what he meant. Sean then revealed the devastating truth. Andorra was dying because of him. The energy he had been extracting all this time was draining Andorra's life force, causing drought, destruction, and suffering for countless people. But Hazenja refused to believe him. He argued that the energy he had taken was being used for a greater purpose. It had reduced pollution on the surface and vastly improved the living conditions in Japan. Not only that, but without the energy he had stolen, he wouldn't have had enough money to treat Sean's illness when he was a child. However, Sean wasn't convinced. He looked directly at Hazenja and declared, "None of that matters. Because of you, everyone in Andorra is going to die. I won't let that happen." Hearing this, Hazenja's face darkened. "Then you leave me no choice." Without warning, he pulled out a gun and aimed it at Sean, preparing to kill him. Emilio instantly reacted, rushing forward to protect Sean. At that very moment, the crystal inside Sean activated again, opening a new portal. In the blink of an eye, both Sean and Emilio were transported back to Andorra. But something was different this time. Instead of landing in a random location, they found themselves right in the middle of a fierce battle, where Misha, Felix, Gerardo, and Louis were fighting against Ibelda. As soon as Sean and Emilio arrived, everyone immediately questioned why they were there. However, there was no time for explanations. The battle was still raging. Without hesitation, Sean and Emilio drew their weapons and attacked Ibelda with full force. However, something terrifying happened. Ibelda transformed into a monstrous, enormous creature with a grotesque and otherworldly appearance. He roared furiously and launched a vicious attack on Misha. Felix and Louis rushed to protect her, but the monstrous Ibelda overpowered them, knocking them both to the ground. Their injuries were severe, especially Felix, who suffered a critical blow. Realizing they were at a disadvantage, the entire team made the difficult decision to retreat before anyone else got hurt. Meanwhile, Elijah was alone in his room, deep in concentration. Alicia, worried about him, approached the leader and voiced her concerns. "Elijah has been in there for too long without food or water. What if something happens to him?" she said anxiously. The leader reassured her, explaining that Elijah had been assigned an important mission, to understand what was happening with Andorra's energy. This required intense focus, and they needed to give him more time. However, Alicia's concern proved to be justified. Suddenly, a loud noise came from Elijah's room. Alarmed, the group rushed inside, only to find him collapsed on the floor, unconscious. They immediately took him to the medical center. Once he regained consciousness, they urgently asked him what he had discovered. Elijah, still weak, revealed what he had seen. Andorra's energy is leaking. It's being absorbed into a place called Turnavag. However, before he could explain further, his body gave out again, unable to handle the strain. The leader wasted no time. He gathered Pascal and the rest of the team to discuss Elijah's findings. Pascal, deep in thought, finally spoke up. Turnavag is located in the middle of the ocean. Legends say it was once a city built by extraterrestrials. But if Elijah is right, then those legends might actually be true. We need to get there immediately. Just then, Sean and Emilio entered the room, declaring that they were going to Turnavag as well. The entire group was overjoyed. Sean and Emilio had returned. However, as soon as Sean learned about the energy leakage, he spoke up with deep guilt in his voice. He apologized to everyone, revealing that his father was the one responsible for stealing Andorra's energy. He told them everything, the entire truth he had uncovered about Hazenja's actions. Everyone was shocked. At the same time, they knew there was no time to waste. They had to stop Hazenja before it was too late. To get to Turnavag quickly, Alicia instructed Flareon to transform into a dragon, allowing Sean, Emilio, and Pascal to ride ahead. Their mission was to scout the city first, while the others stayed behind to fortify the palace and capital. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until disaster struck. Just as Sean, Emilio, and Pascal were about to take off on Flareon, Ibelda's monstrous form suddenly appeared again, blocking their escape. The beast lunged at Flareon, preventing him from taking flight. In the chaos, Pascal was thrown off, landing directly onto Ibelda's massive body. With no other option and time running out, Pascal made a heart-wrenching decision. He pulled out an explosive device, looking up at Sean and Emilio one last time. Get to Turnavog, no matter what happens. Before they could react, he activated the bomb, sacrificing himself to ensure that Flareon could take off and escape. As the explosion erupted behind them, Sean and Emilio screamed Pascal's name, but it was too late. They had no choice but to fly away, leaving their fallen friend behind. Flareon flew at incredible speed, carrying them toward Turnavog. Meanwhile, Joseph refused to believe that Pascal was dead. He frantically searched for him, determined to find proof that he had survived. Back on the battlefield, the leader and the rest of the team were still struggling against Ibelda's monstrous form. No matter how much they attacked, the creature was too powerful. At that moment, Gerardo realized that this was his battle to finish. His old friend had become a monster, and he knew that only he could end this once and for all. Without hesitation, Gerardo charged straight toward the beast, getting dangerously close. The others yelled at him to stop, but he ignored them. The monster opened its enormous mouth and swallowed him whole. But Gerardo had planned for this. Once inside the beast, he detonated one of Pascal's bombs, causing the creature to explode from within. Ibelda was finally dead. However, Gerardo perished along with him. The entire team mourned his loss, but there was no time to grieve. The battle wasn't over yet. Meanwhile, Joseph refused to give up hope. He searched every corner of the battlefield, desperate to find any sign of Pascal. Finally, he spotted something, a single shoe lying on the ground nearby. Joseph froze in place, his heart pounding. That means Pascal must be close by. Without wasting a second, he began shouting Pascal's name, praying for a response. At the same time, Sean and Emilio finally arrived at Turnavog. The city was nothing like they had imagined. It consisted of a massive tower, so tall that it seemed to pierce the sky. At its very peak, a colossal crystal floated in the air, glowing with an eerie light. The moment Sean saw it, he immediately understood the truth. That crystal must be the reason Andora's energy is leaking. Turning to Emilio, he shouted, "We have to destroy it." Without hesitation, they both drew their weapons and began attacking the crystal. But suddenly, another weapon emerged from a separate portal, blocking their attacks. As they recoiled in surprise, a figure stepped through the portal. It was Hazenja. He smirked confidently as he faced them, revealing that he, too, possessed a blue crystal. However, unlike Sean and Emilio, his Andora weapon had been modified in his laboratory. Instead of a normal blade, his weapon had transformed into massive mechanical tentacle arms, allowing him to attack and defend with incredible speed and power. The battle was far from over. Hazenja was ready to fight. Joseph continued calling out for Pascal, his voice echoing through the battlefield. Just when he was starting to lose hope, Pascal finally responded. Joseph immediately ran toward the sound, his heart pounding. He found Pascal hanging from a tree, surprisingly unharmed. Relief and joy overwhelmed him, and he couldn't stop himself from crying. He quickly helped Pascal climb down safely, and together, they prepared to return to the palace. Meanwhile, Emilio and Sean were still locked in battle against Hazenja. The fight had taken a devastating turn. Hazenja relentlessly attacked Emilio, striking him down so hard that he couldn't get back up. At the same time, Sean was completely restrained, wrapped tightly by Hazenja's mechanical tentacle arms, unable to help. Hazenja then raised one of his arms, preparing to deliver the final blow to Sean. This was supposed to be the end. But just before his mechanical arm touched Sean, Hazenja hesitated. Memories flooded his mind. Sean as a child, their time together, the moments they shared as a family. For the first time, his heart wavered. He couldn't do it. He couldn't kill the son he had raised. At that moment, Emilio regained his strength and stood up. Overwhelmed by fear for Sean, his weapon suddenly evolved, becoming more powerful than ever before. Without a second thought, he struck Hazenja with a devastating blow, finally killing him. Sean, however, felt no victory in his father's death. He lowered his head in sorrow, grieving the man who had raised him despite everything. Emilio apologized, feeling guilty for what he had done. But Sean reassured him, saying, "You saved me." With Hazenja gone, the massive crystal at the top of Turnavog became unstable. The entire city began to collapse. Before it was too late, Flareon swooped in and carried them both away, flying them back to the palace just in time before the city crumbled into nothingness. When they arrived, everyone at the palace celebrated their return. Upon hearing that Andora had been saved, cheers erupted throughout the capital. To mark the occasion, the people organized a grand celebration, and everyone gathered, full of joy and relief. However, in the middle of the celebration, Sean quietly slipped away, needing some time alone. Emilio followed after him. Standing beneath the night sky, Sean finally spoke. "I can't leave my mother alone, not after losing my father. I have to go back to the surface." Emilio understood, but deep inside, he felt an immense sadness. He didn't want to say goodbye to his friend. For the final time, the two shook hands, a silent farewell between two brothers who had gone through countless battles together. Then, Sean focused on the blue crystal inside him, channeling his emotions to open a portal to the surface. As soon as he stepped through, the crystal fell from his chest and shattered into pieces, marking the end of the last remaining connection between the two worlds. Even though he had returned home, Sean never forgot Andorra. Every memory, every adventure, and every friend he made there stayed with him forever.